Michelle?
You got it.
All right. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, this meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by viewing the Duxbury Government Access Channels, Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can visit pac-tv.org/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. With that, I call the meeting to order, and our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now have open forum. We have a lot on the agenda this evening. If you wouldn't mind, if you do have an open forum question or comment that you'd like to make, if you could keep it short. This is not something we can respond to, but we can consider for a future agenda item. With that, if there's anybody for open forum, the podium is yours.
There's lots of chairs in the front. Lots, seriously. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Please, come and sit down. Make yourselves comfortable.
Thank you, Fernando.
I have one thing briefly,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. This past week, I think it was on Thursday, the school department lost a good friend, Tom Drummy. If anybody was familiar, Tom Drummy passed away. He was a custodian over at the Chandler School. He was a wonderful guy. He had been sick for just a little while, but I happened to see him about a month ago at the community reader event, and he was a wonderful person. He was great with the kids. If anybody of you, some of you may have had kids that knew him, but I think it'd be appropriate to have a moment of silence.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Does anybody else on the board have any open forum? Okay. With that, I'll move on to new business. We have a discussion regarding bond anticipation notes regarding the seawall. It's going to be presented by Mary McKinnon, our finance director.
That was him.
Fantastic.
And then just
I believe this is on.
Pictures on the back.
the light on.
Yes. We
you're,
good?
You're good.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Before we jump into the bond anticipation notes, I'd just like to let the board know that on Thursday, April 11th, I was joined by our town manager, Rainey Reed, our treasurer collector, Corey Lydon. I don't know if you folks have met Corey in person yet. We are also joined by our building commissioner, Jim Wazalewski, and our financial advisor, Lynn Welsh from Unibank Fiscal Advisory Services, to complete a credit rating call with Standard & Poor's, typically an annual event. And a credit rating is an indicator of our financial health and determines our worthiness of repayment of our debt obligations in the market. And I'm happy to report that the town's long-term credit rating was upheld by Standard & Poor's at our highest possible rating of a AAA. And I think we're all very happy to know that that rating has been upheld. And then subsequent to our rating call on April 17th, the town issued $13,565,000 of bond anticipation notes. The notes will settle on May 1st of 2024, and they will be up for renewal on May 1st of 2025. The notes included the funding for the following projects. $2.2 million to roll over the existing ban that the town already had outstanding for the start of the DPW facility. $1.365 million for 3 different school capital projects that were authorized by town meeting last March. $5 million to start the seawall construction project, and $5 million to start the construction for the DPW facility. The sum total is $13,565,000. There were 6 competitive bids that were received for the bond anticipation notes. The lowest winning bid came in from TD Securities with a net interest cost of 3.598%, and it included a premium of $122,356. The premium will be used to pay not only the issuance costs, but also the first year's interest costs to reduce the cost of the debt repayment. I expect that we will permanently finance these notes in May of 2025 instead of renewing them. And when we refinance these, we will also be refinancing with additional debt to cover the cost of construction for the seawall as well as DPW facility. It will take us further into the construction schedule for those projects, and we will have a better sense of what those anticipated costs are at that time. So tonight, I am asking the board to take a comprehensive vote to approve the sale of the notes, to approve the final official disclosure statement that was dated April 17th, to approve the significant events disclosure, and approve and sign all related documents prepared by bond counsel and presented this evening for your signature. With that being said, I've handed out for each of you a modified motion that is shorter than we've used in years past. It's in front of you tonight, and we can complete the signing of the documents at the conclusion of the meeting in order to save time shuffling paper. I'll come back down at the end of the meeting. So with that being said, I will open it to the board for questions or a motion.
Go right to left. Fernando, you have any questions?
No, no questions.
All right.
Just one, Mary, you said 3.598%.
Correct.
On the vote, I think we have a placeholder for 4.5%.
So the coupon rate on the note themselves is, the stated rate is 4.5%, but when you factor in the premium, the net interest cost comes out to 3.598%.
Okay, so the 4.5 is inclusive of the premium?
It's before the premium is applied.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have just a quick question. You mentioned that you probably won't renew these bonds next year and they'd go into a permanent debt. Why would you do that when this rate doesn't seem, this seems like a good rate to me? Why would we go permanent debt?
So with bans, we already have a ban outstanding for 2.2 million, which is included in this renewal. It will require in the third year a pay down if we continue to keep it structured as short-term debt. So to avoid that pay down on the short-term debt, we would permanently finance that. And the rates right now are actually very comparable, are somewhat comparable for long-term and short-term rates at this time in the market. And if that continues, then we would expect that there would be no real advantage to keeping it as a short-term financing and that we would permanently finance it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, having sat in quite a few of these meetings that Mary described earlier over the years, I can tell you this was probably the best one I've ever been in. It was perfectly orchestrated, well scripted. The comments and the replies were outstanding. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I even had a speaking part, so that was even better.
Oh, great. For these, with respect to this, when would the actual debt exclusion, those 5 million, when will those hit people's tax bills?
So the interest associated with the short-term borrowing has already started to hit the tax bills. So the $2.2 million that was borrowed last year, but it's only the interest cost right now that is that's affecting the tax bills. When we permanently finance these pieces of debt, that's when they start to go onto the tax bill.
Okay, so when we permanently finance that
Which will be
5
next
million
year.
and then the other 5 million for
Exactly.
next year. Okay,
Exactly.
all right. That was the only question I have. Any other questions? All right.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman, appreciate the Finance Department's assistance in helping us maintain our AAA rating with rates continuing to go up and seeing what federal rates are doing for just regular stocks and regular bonds. The fact that we're able to pull off effectively a net 4.5, I think, is impressive. So thank you for that.
Agree.
Anybody from the audience have any questions? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the Select Board authorize the sale of $13,565,000 in general obligation bonds dated May 1, 2024, as outlined in the document entitled Vote of the Select Board dated April 22, 2024, as prepared by bond counsel and provided to each board member. And further, I move that the Select Board authorize the following documents as presented: bond note, vote of the Select Board, official statement certificate, tax certificate, and continuing disclosure statement, and we waive full reading of these documents.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
Thank you.
passes unanimously. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mary.
Mayor.
Thank you, Mary.
All right.
And Rainey for your small speaking role.
Thank you, Brian.
The next order of business is discussion with Duxbury Beach Reservation regarding the predation program. It's going to be presented initially here by Brennan McGlathery.
And you all have copies of the updated presentation, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michelle. I have a limited number of them. If people need them, I have a dozen copies.
It's going to go up on the screen, isn't it? Yeah.
I made them. You guys need them.
I didn't see,
I know Brian hates paper.
Nobody wants to sit in the front.
Did you sit in front of the school?
Yeah. That's what it is.
That's the difference between you and me, baby. I was in the back.
That's a brown, that's a teacher.
Interesting stuff happened in the back.
So I'm hearing that someone else is speaking on behalf of Duxbury Beach Reservation. Are we?
Is participating as well?
We can't, unless you're going to stand at the podium.
Good, but
Brenna McGlathery, Duxbury Beach Reservation.
Thank you.
So Carolyn Mostello from Mass Wildlife is on the call, and she was going to start out by speaking briefly about, from a state perspective.
okay.
All right, that's fine.
It's Brenna. Can folks hear me okay?
Yes.
If you could just introduce yourself.
Carolyn Mostello. I'm a coastal waterbird biologist with the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Okay.
So I wanted to provide some background tonight on habitat conservation plans and our mitigation requirement for the piping plover habitat conservation plan as a foundation for tonight's discussion. So the HCP program is a federal program, has the goal of reducing conflicts between listed species and economic development. So the program allows incidental take or harm of federally listed species like the piping plover, while also providing mitigation that will benefit the species. The piping plovers are federally listed species. They're listed as threatened. And the number of piping plovers in Massachusetts has really grown substantially over the past 30 plus years. And this has put an increasing amount of pressure on beach access. The Mass Wildlife developed habitat conservation plan and received an incidental take permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the piping plover back in 2016. So the permit essentially legalized incidental take that would occur through certain activities that are covered under the permit that also increase beach access, for instance, operating vehicles near chicks. So as the permit holder, Mass Wildlife issues sub-permits that allow beach managers to reduce certain protections for plovers to allow for greater beach access. So there are many different requirements for participation in the HCP program. The one we're talking about tonight is that beach managers must provide mitigation for take. And the only mitigation activity approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is selective predator management. And that's because it can provide very significant and measurable benefits to plovers. So Mass Wildlife, again, is the permit holder is responsible for ensuring that enough mitigation occurs statewide to balance the take that occurs. So selective predator management can occur on-site or off-site. And on-site means that the HCP participant conducts its own selective predator management. And off-site means that the entity pays a fee and Mass Wildlife contracts with other entities to conduct selective predator management. So if a large number of repairs will be impacted by HCP activities, it's much more cost effective to conduct on-site mitigation And this is the case at Duxbury Beach, which has the highest number of pairs impacted by the HCP of any site in the state. Also, our offsite mitigation program is really too small to provide mitigation for large amounts of heat. There isn't ways for beach managers to participate in the HCP program and avoid selective predator management because Mass Wildlife is bound by the conditions of its federal permit. Sites that want the increased beach access that the HCP provides must fund selective predator management, either on-site or off-site. Sites that don't want to fund selective predator management can't participate in HCP. Recreational access will be more limited. It's their choice to participate in the program or not, but if they do, they have to fund selective predator management. If Mass Wildlife meets its federal, statewide mitigation requirements, it can allow limited amounts of other types of mitigation, including education, increased enforcement, and habitat improvement as some examples. So we're currently working on revising the HCP, and we have the opportunity to explore other options for mitigation. And those aren't guaranteed, but it is possible that there will be more mitigation options in the future. Right now, Mass Wildlife remains limited to meeting its federal mitigation requirement through selective predator management. So that's just a brief summary of the HCP and mitigation requirements, and I'm happy to take questions, once we get to that portion of the meeting. Thank you.
I think, are you going to stick around, Ms. Mostello?
Yes, I'll stick around.
Okay. I think with that, I'll allow Brenna to continue with the presentation, and we'll hold questions till the end of that.
Sure. Okay. So yeah, again, my name is Brenna McGlathry. I'm the Assistant Director at Duxbury Beach Reservation. Some of my presentation will kind of repeat a little bit of what Carolyn just said, but I think it's a complicated topic, so hopefully that repetition is helpful rather than annoying. So recently questions have come up regarding predator management program on Duxbury Beach. This is obviously a controversial and an upsetting topic, but it is one of the challenges that Duxbury Beach Reservation faces when trying to balance the many uses. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the PowerPoint up though. It's in front of me, so. No worries, so it's just the title slide, so no one's missing anything. Just a pretty picture. All right, is this on? Okay. So before I dive into the predator management program, I want to take a step back and just remind us all of what DBR is working to accomplish on the beach. So our mission is 3 parts. Preserve the landform for the protection of the communities behind the barrier beach, protect the species that use the beach, and promote a naturally functioning barrier beach ecosystem, and work for public access and enjoyment of the property. So clearly, it's not always easy, as we all know, or even possible for all of these parts of the mission to succeed at once or to meet the expectations of all of the stakeholder groups that use Duxbury Beach. But specifically for predator management, there's kind of 2 mission-related conflicts that come up. First, there are a number of species in Massachusetts with populations that have thrived alongside humans. Many, like coyotes, came into the state because of human impacts on the land and other species. Now we have, very large populations of some of these species that prey on other native protected species like the piping plover and least tern that we have on Duxbury Beach. Those species populations have been adversely impacted by human activities, and they require more protection, and part of that is control of predator species for a limited part of the year. Second, as Carolyn said, the permit that we need to allow a lot of the beach access during the summer requires predator management as mitigation. So again, a little repetitive, but hopefully that's helpful. So This is, of course, the time of year when folks start asking questions about beach access. Just a few weeks ago, I was here speaking about that specifically. What access will look like. Will there be more or fewer closures than last year, et cetera. The number of piping plovers and least-term pairs has been increasing on Duxbury Beach and increasing statewide for many years, as Carolyn said. And it is at a level now, especially since about 2014, on Duxbury Beach specifically, where managing for beach access while adhering to state and federal regulations is really difficult. But of course, people want to get on the beach during the summer. DBR hears that concern and has been trying, very hard to do what we can to get access. So the biggest source of access during the nesting season has been participation in the state's Habitat Conservation Plan. So the HCP has covered activities, which are basically different ways to get some flexibility for recreation during the nesting season. That is a vast oversimplification of all the work that Carolyn and others put into it. But those activities are use of roads and parking lots in the vicinity of unfledged chicks. Very important, of course, on Duxbury Beach, where pretty much a road and parking lots run the length of the barrier, and those chicks will cross the parking lot and the roads. So that first activity, very important for access for us. Second, recreation and beach operations. That includes things like reducing fencing around nests, deterring nesting in certain areas, which we spoke about quite a bit and is out on the beach right now, and nest moving if necessary. And then OSV use in the vicinity of unfledged chicks. And that's something else that we've been working on with beach ops for this season with escorting past chicks. So DBR's permit includes all three of those covered activities and also allows us to expose more pairs of birds to potential risk than any other beach in the state. So each of these activities has, really large beneficial impact on recreation, especially on the town lease portion of the beach every year. Even if it's not, obvious to the public, folks have, said that this permit is optional. And it is. If the town, decided that it didn't want to participate in the HCP, then DBR would be able to, reduce the scope of our HCP, our COI, to include, maybe just Duxbury Beach Park, reduce the number of covered activities, reduce the number of pairs we impact by quite a lot, from 24 to maybe a handful, and that would be, also a huge decrease in recreational access to the beach during the summer. So assuming that we want to keep the COI or our permit under the HCP what it is now, then we have to, like Carolyn said, mitigate for that. We don't get it all for free. The plan is meant to, as it says up there from Mass Wildlife, advance conservation while maintaining and improving access. So as Carolyn said, the state has to provide mitigation to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for each pair that's exposed statewide. In order to do so, the state has to collect that mitigation from the sub-permit holders like DBR. All right. Again, as Carolyn said, the only form of mitigation the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will accept from the state is predator management. So simply put, the state has to make sure that statewide they're receiving enough mitigation in the form of predator management to account for all of the mitigation from its sub-permittees. If you look at DBR's permit and the mitigation plan, you'll see that it contains a whole list, several pages long, of different activities ranging from predator management to summer education programs. In the past, the state has been flexible and allowed additional mitigation options for DBR other than or in addition to predator management to kind of make up all of our mitigation credits. But the state was making up DBR's deficit when it came to predator management in order to do that. So with the increase in take exposures that DBR has requested, the state can't continue to make up that deficit. So we can't continue to do these other activities in addition to predator management. So on-site predator management and paying into an off-site mitigation for predator management will both be necessary moving forward and are going to be DBR's only option for mitigation. So conducting that on-site predator management during a portion of the year, again, is cost effective, as Carolyn said, but moving forward with the scope of access that we're looking for and take exposures or flexibility that we're looking for, we'll need to do both. Another way that the predator program can benefit recreation is that it creates a window of time on the beach when hopefully these pairs can be more successful, succeed sooner, get off the beach sooner, reopen things sooner. All right. So several entities are involved in the predator management program on Duxbury Beach, and all have to really communicate and work together for it to run as it's intended. So as I've already mentioned, as Carolyn mentioned, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Mass Wildlife are involved from the get-go from the perspective of approving the predator management program as part of DBR's mitigation. Both have also worked with various beach managers and researchers to determine best practices for predator management, both lethal and non-lethal, and the efficacy of those activities. So we really do rely on them for best practices on Duxbury Beach as well. The predator management work is contracted out to USDA APHIS Wildlife Services, who has the necessary permits, training, and knowledge to conduct the work. That is not the case, obviously, for DBR. Their efforts are supported, however, by data collection and observations made by DBR and beach operations staff. It's really imperative, from that perspective, that the wildlife concerns are, very promptly communicated to DBR so that APHIS can do their work properly. So it's important that beach operations, if they receive word from the public or their staff sees something, DBR staff sees something, that we communicate that to make sure that things are running smoothly and are safe for everybody involved. So obviously there can be challenges, a lot of entities involved, big beach, a lot of species. Breakdowns in communication at several levels last summer led to issues which DBR and Mass Wildlife have taken steps to address for this season. So last season, USDA APHIS removed a coyote from Duxbury Beach, and the juveniles remained on site after the fact. According to USDA APHIS's protocol, what we've been told is that if an adult with juveniles is removed, or they suspect it might have juveniles because they don't always know, they make kind of initial efforts to locate and remove them. But because the home range of a coyote is so huge, that's typically not successful to do right then. So that is what happened at Duxbury Beach. APHIS returned to their protocol was to then wait until the juveniles were reported observed and then to come back and take next steps. And that is what happened. APHIS returned to the site the day after they were observed by DBR staff, and we were able to tell them that there were indeed juveniles on site. And so although that is USDA APHIS's protocol, DBR, like others in the community, are concerned that these steps, to locate and remove the juveniles did not happen quickly enough. I think we're all on the same page with that. I can speak for everyone at DBR and say that we were extremely upset with how the situation, happened last season, and that we weren't prepared to fix the problem more quickly. Through this incident, we learned better kind of what questions to ask, what the existing protocols from APHIS were, and that's enabled us to hopefully make changes to make it better, or if the situation arises, to ask the right questions sooner to hopefully move things along and not get into the same scenario. So we've had many conversations with Mass Wildlife and APHIS while it was happening last summer, and again this fall and winter, to figure out a better system. Both Mass Wildlife and DBR met with USDA APHIS over the off-season to require changes to their communication and the response. We've increased training for DBR staff and refined some of our protocols to hopefully discourage denning on the beach and concentrate efforts to remove denning individuals earlier in order to help prevent this type of issue before it can come up, and if that isn't possible, to locate and remove juveniles more quickly. We're communicating with beach operations about the importance of notifying DBR anytime there's a wildlife concern on the beach or anytime they hear from the public that there's a wildlife concern on the beach. Although, of course, we'd also encourage the public to reach out to us if they have a wildlife concern on the beach. Communication is just really key for all of these things going smoothly. Unfortunately, last summer, well-meaning individuals tried to trap the juveniles independently. Unfortunately, that is dangerous for wildlife and the folks working out there when multiple groups are on site without communication or proper approval. So our goal at DBR is try to balance the many different stakeholder groups and what they're looking for and conduct a predator management program that is humane, effective, but also safe for everybody out there. So on the flip side, while lethal predator management is currently our only option for mitigation, we do have a robust non-lethal predator management program as well to complement that. So I'll just run through quickly some of those items. Trash management, that's a big one. Early on, we made sure to remove trash cans from the front beach rather than drawing predators out to that area. Purchasing, closed and better trash cans to test out, again, to reduce litter on the beach and reduce attracting predators, hosting cleanups, and paying folks year-round, both on staff and other crews, to do cleanup. We have several DBR staff with extensive experience putting up predator exclosures, which go around nests, individual plover nests, at other beaches, and have state approval to erect them at Duxbury Beach if they're appropriate, which they rarely are because of the nesting habitat and locations. We manage the habitat to try to reduce denning. We have game cameras and extensive data collection to help target and improve lethal and non-lethal efforts. Staff presence early in the morning and into the evening in nesting areas can help deter predators. There's anti-perching efforts to try to, reduce the number of avian predators in nesting areas. As Carolyn mentioned, there's ongoing work to kind of look at and revise the habitat conservation plan. DBR is an active participant in that and is participating specifically in the task group for looking at mitigation. And then we do an annual review of non-lethal options, both internally and with USDA APHIS as the subject matter expert. A lot of there are a lot of non-lethal options, obviously, beyond what's listed here, to try to deter predators either from nesting areas specifically or limit their presence in nesting areas or on site. But there are a lot of considerations for each. It's not kind of one size fits all. There are, potential non-target impacts, including non-target impacts to protected species, which obviously we can't do if they're going to harm listed species. We have to look at the current suite of predators on site. For example, we wouldn't, implement a feral cat removal program or relocation program when we don't have a feral cat problem, or something that's addressing skunks when there's not a skunk problem out there. So there's just a lot of kind of very specific measures that wouldn't be necessary on Duxbury Beach if there's not that predator. We have to look at, obviously effort and cost, what is feasible. We have to look at kind of the micro nest habitat as well as the nesting habitat at a more macro level, site-wide, the configuration of the least-turn colony, kind of the size and shape, what makes sense, and again, kind of the width of the beach, the sediment type, both at a micro and macro level, the vegetation, and obviously proximity to beachgoers or other infrastructure, both to make sure that nothing is interfered with and to make sure that the beachgoers stay safe. So in a nutshell, the predator management program on Duxbury Beach involves both lethal and non-lethal efforts, but in the end, again, we need that lethal removal portion as mitigation for the permit that allows recreation in large part during the nesting season. I've got a little wonky, but hopefully it's still legible. So this is obviously, as I said at the beginning, a complicated and also emotional topic. DBR is committed to continuing to review and revise its predator management program as necessary, to answering any questions that we can, and helping direct folks to experts when we don't have the answers, like Carolyn. We will continue to work to try to balance the various missions of the reservation and the uses of the beach, and follow the best practices laid out by Mass Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and USDA APHIS when it comes to this predator management and endangered species work. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Does any members of the board have any questions?
Yeah, I have, if that's
Go
okay,
ahead.
yeah. So I just want to, maybe a couple of comments and then a clarification, right? So what I heard is that coyotes have been positively impacted by human activity, i.e. the population of coyotes has increased as a result of that. That's what I heard, right? Did I hear that right? Or they moved into...
I am not a coyote expert. From what I've read and heard, that is the case, but maybe Carolyn has some additional information.
And then on the other side, piping plovers have been negatively, i.e. the population has decreased by human activity, right? And so
Yeah.
this is why you have if we want to, and then the second point is, if we want to get access to the beach, then one of the actions that we need to take is, one of the mitigating actions is to try and maintain that balance or redress that balance, right? That's the intent, yeah?
Yeah, not to speak for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but I mean, if their mission with this plan is to work towards conservation of the species while balancing recreation, then, and they have felt, and hopefully Carolyn can speak more to this,
Right.
That predator management is the most effective way of improving the conservation of that species.
And the final comment is basically for us to be able to get access to do the 1, 2, and 3 that we talked about, right? Use of the parking lots, recreation. We have no choice, right? You have no choice, and that's because it's mandated by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and in turn, because they get the permit from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Mass Fish and Wildlife. So there's a cascading effect, right?
Correct.
Okay. That's just my comments, that's all. Just clarifying, make sure my understanding of this process is correct.
Go right ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to clarify a couple things from the presentation. You'd mentioned, I guess this goes back to last year, when the pups were, you said, removed. Were they destroyed, or were they actually moved somewhere? I want to make sure I'm understanding the terminology.
They were euthanized.
Euthanized, okay. And then...
Carolyn, I believe, can probably speak to what the
Okay. Well, we were talking about
USDA's
lethal
protocol is for
measures, so
that.
I presume what was done to the mother was done to the pups. The other thing that I just wanted to clarify is on, you have a slide, the piping plover HCP. It's the third one in,
Yeah.
I think. The plan, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding the intent of the language here. The plan is to advance conservation and recovery in Massachusetts while maintaining, and this is what I want to ask. You say, and improving public access and recreation. Can you extrapolate a little bit for me, or explain a little more as to what time frame we're talking about? So when we say we're improving public access and recreation, certainly anything more than last year is better, an improvement. But when we say we're improving public access and recreation, can you frame that out for me a little bit?
That's a quote directly from Mass Wildlife's website, so I'll let
Okay.
Carolyn speak to
I'd love to know
that.
more about that. Okay.
Right, so piping plovers have a large footprint on the beach, as I'm sure everyone is aware here. On Duxbury Beach, there are nearly 50 pairs of plovers that are now nesting on the beach. As Brennan mentioned, they're crossing from the ocean side to the bay side. And so they're coming into proximity of vehicles. So the situation at Duxbury Beach now is that once chicks are present and on the beach, recreational vehicle use, for instance, would have to be curtailed without the HCP because under our state and federal management guidelines, vehicles can't operate within 200 meters of unfledged chicks. So the HCP is essentially allowing vehicle access to Duxbury Beach for much longer than you would have it without the HCP. It's very challenging on Duxbury Beach because of the high number of plovers and that huge increase we've seen in plovers, there and statewide. Since the HCP was initiated in 2016. So while it doesn't feel like the HCP may be doing as much as beachgoers would like, the situation would be far worse without the HCP.
Thanks. And that just final question, and Ms. Mostello touched upon it. We have increasing numbers of birds over a number of 15, 20, 30 years. Is there any forecast on what's going to be the upper limit of what's making Duxbury Beach so attractive to the birds? I mean, we all love the beach, so there's something about the beach the birds love. Are we able to, I don't know, is there a way to determine what's attracting them?
Survey the birds.
Well, you can survey the birds. Sure.
I think like Carolyn said, and maybe Carolyn has a better idea, but these increases aren't just at Duxbury Beach, it's statewide. There's a lot of places, even, habitat you would think like on these small beaches in Boston with really busy areas that you would think, why would a bird go there, that are, starting to nest in kind of new areas. And that means that at other beaches, it's going to be in higher numbers. But maybe Carolyn has a better idea of what our upper limit might be at Duxbury Beach.
Maybe another way to ask the question, is there any forecast of when the piping plover population is robust enough so that it's not federally protected anymore? That's the question.
So that's a really great question. And, the issue that we're having in Massachusetts is that our population has been doing just great. But we're part of a larger protected population, the Atlantic coast population, and it's that Atlantic coast population that's threatened. And while that population as a whole is not recovering, the piping plover is going to remain listed, even though in our little corner of Massachusetts it's doing well. If it weren't doing well in Massachusetts, we wouldn't have the HCP.
Okay.
And that's why we need to plan for revising our HCP. That's what we're working on now to provide greater flexibility in the face of this big population increase. I don't know why overall why plovers are doing so well in Massachusetts, but as Brenna mentioned, it's not Duxbury alone. Duxbury's a very nice beach, but they're also doing quite well at beaches that aren't quite as nice as Duxbury. So it's a statewide phenomenon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Amy?
So this is a brutal choice. It's in order to allow vehicles on the beach, we are required to do the predator management, which includes the lethal. And I think, when we're talking about coyotes, that's one thing, but I'm quite certain that this would extend to foxes and other predators as well. So it's a really difficult, I think none of us want to see, lactating moms, whether they're coyotes or fox or whatever, being destroyed, and then, other creatures suffering until they're eventually destroyed too. I was hoping that the answer was going to be that they were removed and relocated somewhere, and apparently that's not the case. So I did write down during the presentation that when you were talking about this required lethal elimination of the predators, that it allows for use during the nesting season. But if I'm remembering accurately, we didn't get much access during the nesting season. So it seems that I'm a little confused about that, but I did write it down, so perhaps I misheard. And then, so maybe you could speak to that a little bit. But my big question here is, what other beaches, are there other beaches in the Commonwealth that have this requirement that in order for there to be cars allowed on the beach, that then they must participate in this lethal predator program?
I'll respond to that last question. There are about unpermitted sites participating in the HCP in Massachusetts, and they're all either conducting on-site or paying into off-site mitigation. That includes selective predator management.
And then in terms of your first part of your question, I think you were referring to when I said the aim of the predator management and the removal of these predators, it's for a short portion of the year. And the idea is to create a window for plovers and terns to use the beach without as high a predator population to successfully nest, fledge, and leave. So the aim of that being earlier access. But in terms of use of the beach, that would be the HCP and the mitigation. I mean, we're able to have vehicles, parking in the resident parking lot throughout the season. And when the OSV is accessible, driving down the back road and, having to stop when birds are crossing, but they're able to do that. And that's, again, because of the HCP. But I agree, it's not an easy topic. As
not an
we
easy
always
topic.
say at DBR, no one gets into wildlife biology because they want to, harm animals, but it is the conservation tool that is the mitigation for this program.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mostella, the authority for this predatory program, where does that come from either the federal laws or federal regulation that mandate that a state does this?
So this is part of our habitat conservation plan, supported our application for the incidental take permit. So we worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service during the development of the HCP to arrive at a mitigation option that would meet their federal standards. And this was the option that they were comfortable with. And so that's what we have for now.
So there is no law or regulation that mandates this. This is something that was written by Mass Fish and Wildlife as part of their permit and could be unwritten as well.
It can be changed if our HCP permit is revised. So we're working on that revision now, but our current program mandates this as a mitigation option, and it cannot be changed until that revision is complete. And, there's no guarantee that the options will increase going forward, although we hope that they will. And our goal is to expand mitigation options going forward.
Well,
Just to clarify, that would be U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, correct, Carolyn, would have to approve that expansion
Right.
of options. Yeah.
So we would write this revised HCP, and it would be subject to approval by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
and
Yeah.
neither the U.S. Fish and Wildlife nor you are really working off any laws. This is simply a best practice or something that sits well with U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Well, the HCP is a program in regulation, but the details of each HCP are going to differ from project to project.
Correct. Okay. Well, I hope you stick around. There's certainly a lot of folks in the audience here that are pretty upset about this program. With that, I will take any questions or comments from the audience. it's a him, and he's a member of the public. I'll let him jump in at some point. Okay, at some point. I'll take audience members first.
Susan Curtis, High Street. I want to let you know this is the reason we're here. Mr. Chairman, I ask that you allow Eddie Ramos, who was called to the beach to rescue this little pup that was abandoned because his mother and father were shot. And the people in this audience need to hear the story from beginning to end. And I ask that you give him permission to speak.
Anyone's got permission to speak, so if
Thank you.
you're completed, that's fine. If you could just introduce yourself and...
Hi, I'm Eddie Ramos, the Town of Duxbury's Animal Control Officer.
Nice.
So what happened on June 5th was I was called by the beach operations that there was a pup running in the Bayside area by the second crossover. When I got there, I saw it, didn't want to get too close. My opinion was the mother's probably around somewhere, leave it, let nature take its course. I'm all for letting nature take its course. Just to make sure, I called Zach from the Wildlife Center. He runs the Cape Wildlife Center. Asked him his opinion. He said, mother's probably around, leave it, not a problem. As I'm coming out from where the coyote was, the pup, which was still a good like 100 feet away from me, I was approached by a young lady. She was on the phone with someone, and she just immediately came up and she goes, my boss wants you to take it out of here. I go, that's not how it works. The mother's probably around somewhere. We're going to leave it, see if the mother comes around. She goes, well, 2 weeks ago, they shot a lactating mom. And a week ago, they shot a male. So I'm like, are you serious? And she goes, yeah. So she started to walk away back to the road, and she goes, we'll just have APHIS take care of this. So get back on the phone with Zach. I go, hey, just found out they shot a lactating mom 2 weeks ago and a male a week ago. He goes, well, see how close you can get, take some pictures, send it to me. I'll call the state, see if we can get permission to take this animal down to the Cape Wildlife Center. So I started walking towards it slowly, kept taking pictures, literally got to it, it was right at my feet. Reached down, scruffed, picked it up, completely emaciated, starving, dehydrated, hundreds of ticks all over it. It was dying. Picked it up, called Zach, said, well, I went to my truck. All I had in my truck was a Haverhard trap because I didn't have any cages because I was cleaning out my truck. So I opened up the trap, put it inside, called Zach. He basically said, I'm just waiting for an answer. Give me a little bit of time. In the meantime, I went to a local licensed rehabber, and we were picking ticks off of this thing while I waited. About 20 minutes later, Zach called back and said, we got permission to take it. So I drove it down to the Cape, okay? When I drove it down to the Cape, it was in rough shape, didn't know if it was gonna make it. Waited about 3 days, called back, how's that pup doing? Oh, you know, it's doing okay. We had to give it vitamin K. For those who don't know, vitamin K is what they treat animals that have ingested poison. This is an 8-week-old pup. It was going to die. He goes, but it's doing okay. Called back about a week later, see how it was doing. We got a call saying euthanize it. So that's where that pup went. While all this was going on in the meantime, there was word that there was another pup still out there. So this animal was left out there for 2 weeks with no food, no water, to the point where more than likely it ate an animal that had been poisoned. I don't think anybody specifically would go out and put poison out for it, but they also put out poison for the crows. So if there was a dead crow, this animal eats it, you got poison inside the pup. Not only is that dangerous for the pup, that's dangerous for the seagulls, the hawks, the owls. Anything can eat those animals, and in turn, they will get poisoned. So that's where I have a problem with it. Cars driving on the beach, honestly, I could care less. It doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form. The humane treatment of animals, humane euthanasia, I have no problem with. It's when it becomes inhumane and unethical that's a problem. You knew it was out there for 2 weeks, and you let it starve to death. So that's where I think some things need to be changed as to how things are going. In the article that was in the Clipper, I read that only about 6 a year are part of the program. 6 coyotes a year get killed. Well, there was 6 last year just in Duxbury if you count the pups. 1 pup we never found. What happened to that one? So that's where I have an issue with, is more the humane side of it and the ethical side of it. There has to be different ways to do it. I have offered many times to try to come up with ways. I have some ideas. Not one person has ever reached out to me. So, if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
No, excuse me?
No.
Excuse Yeah, we,
That was done
sorry,
first.
he's tasking the board. For just point of order, I'll allow some questions from the board members, if they have them at this point. It's a little out of order. Is that all right with you folks? Does anybody have any questions
For Eddie?
for Eddie or for Carolyn about that situation?
Not yet.
Okay.
I would like to hear if you have, I mean, I don't know how long it would take. Do you have simples? You have some, you thought some
I mean,
solutions?
there are different ways. You know, I was putting together almost like a containment thing that you can put over the nests that is solid, but it has where the birds can go in and out of. It's basically clear. There's some fencing type of material, but where most of the coyotes are going to come out at nighttime, dusk, dawn. That's when they're out mostly hunting. The birds would be safe in this area, and the coyotes cannot touch them in the nest. Throughout the day, when there's people on the beach and stuff like that, and there's more activity, the coyotes aren't running around the beach. Very, you know what I mean? They want to be more hidden when it's dusk till, overnight. That's when those birds are more in danger of predators. But, I mean, there's a lot of animals that aren't on that list that go after plovers. I mean, kestrels, red-tailed hawks, there's no snowy owls in the summer, but you have saw-whet owls, screech owls. They all go after those birds. So what happens with those animals if they get some of that poison, or if they eat one of the crows? Seagulls will eat the crows. They're scavengers. Now, in turn, all those animals get poisoned. So that's for that part of it. The shooting of the coyotes, there has to be a different way to do it. January, February is hunting season for coyotes.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you have to wait till they have pups?
And one more
Sure, go
clarification,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Are you stating that not only are they shooting, the animals are being shot, the predators are being shot, but there's also a poison of
crows and the
some sort
grackles.
for crows and what was the other?
Grackles? They're smaller
Really?
birds that
And that again is who's doing that?
the beach operations, that's who I heard from. Now, they're not doing it, not beach operations, excuse me on that one. It's not
Okay,
the
we
town that's
might-
doing it.
We might need to get some
They told me
clarification.
that it's part of the whole program, that it's part of the state program, and it was in the article too in the Clipper.
Yeah, I read
It
that
was
as
in that
well.
article.
I have a question for Carol Mastello, and I'm going to let Brenna also hop up here as well. But Carolyn, are you still on?
I am.
The article in the Clipper talked about someone from Mass Fish and Wildlife contacting the wildlife. What's the name of the Cape Cod Wildlife Sanctuary, and ordering that the pup be euthanized. Who and why was that done? If you know.
So I
I know that.
wasn't involved in that, but I can tell you that when wildlife are orphaned, when a parent is killed under a nuisance animal situation like this was, we do not allow the rehab generally of the young. If young are orphaned because their parents were killed by a car or something like that, we will allow them to be rehabbed. But when there's a problem animal control issue and the adults are killed and the young are orphaned, those young are generally not allowed to be rehabbed, and rehabbers are instructed not to accept those young for rehab.
What problem or nuisance was that? Was that a 8-week-old pup that it couldn't be rehabbed and brought somewhere else? Or
So the adults were removed because of their
the pup?
activity on, right, so the pup of the animals that were removed, it's not our policy to allow the rehab of problem animals. So the problem animals were the parents that were removed, and our policy is to not rehab the young of those parents. If sometimes problem animal control will just, in a situation where the adults are not killed, and can be reunited with the young, that's fine. But when the parents are killed, the young are not allowed to be rehabbed.
Okay. So does anybody else have any? Well, actually, Brenna, I saw you at one point. I could see a lot up here. There was a point about grackles and crows. Did you want to make any clarification about the predator program and what is done by DBR as part of their program with grackles and crows? Yeah. I don't know what a grackle is, but
It's a blackbird. Looks like a little crow.
It's got yellow eyes.
They're kind of pretty. They get
I
a
am
bad rap.
always impressed by my fellow board members.
So Carolyn might have more to add to this, but I'll kind of speak based on what we've been told by APHIS, who's doing the control work. Beach Operations is not doing the control work. The only poison that's used for control efforts on the beach is a corvid specific. So it's not, so for like crows.
Okay.
So it's not harmful to other wildlife. It's not used for grackles. There's a different system for removal of that species, which has been a predator on Duxbury Beach. I think owls were mentioned. There's no owl removal on Duxbury Beach. We have not had that predator issue. Let's
Okay.
hope we never do.
I have a question on this pup situation too. How did Mass Wildlife come to know that there was a pup that was delivered to that sanctuary, that it was being treated?
So DBR was not notified by any member of the public or the town of this situation. Our staff, when they observed the juvenile, let their supervisor know, and their supervisor let APHIS know, and APHIS came out the next day. So DBR did not, I want to make that clear, did not knowingly leave juveniles out there for weeks. There was no knowledge that they were out there.
And did they have any contact about euthanizing that pup while it was at the sanctuary?
No, DBR did not have any contact
So this was
with the
unilaterally
rehabber.
between Mass Fish and Wildlife and that sanctuary group?
Yes, we don't have control over, the state policies or APHIS policies about when rehab is allowed or when relocation is allowed. I know that's been asked a lot of why we don't relocate, and I bet, I'm sure Carolyn could expound on that. But from our understanding, that is not an option in Massachusetts to relocate. But again, that's not under DBR's purview.
That's right, Brenna. You can't relocate animals that are rehabbed. They can be released within 5 miles of the point of capture if they're rehabilitated. We can't be transporting animals from one area to another, especially animals that have been problematic in one situation. I mean, can you imagine if you had a problem animal at your home and you trapped it and you released it into your neighbor's home? So we don't do that.
Thank you, Carolyn. We'll have to agree to disagree, but I don't think that pup was a problem. Does anybody wish to speak?
I'm sorry, really quickly. I'm actually the licensed wildlife rehabilitator by
Your name?
DFW, Susanna Tuffy.
Okay. Are you in your street?
It's 58 Stetson Place,
Thank you.
Duxbury. Yes. So I was the one that Eddie contacted. We've worked in the past around wildlife in Duxbury. And when we have wildlife in distress, and I'm not specially permitted to work with carnivores and predatory species, but I am licensed to triage. And I can say that this pup was literally, he couldn't stand, and like Eddie said, covered in ticks. And I did encourage Eddie to call Cape Wildlife and the New England Wildlife Center because that was the best option for him. And I do have a lot of questions about who decided that he needed to be euthanized because I know other rehabbers, and when pups are young enough and orphaned like that, they do not have to be always released within a 5-mile radius. And Carolyn, I'm really grateful that you're here, and I'm actually really interested to talk with you more about this because, like Eddie said, I'm hearing, when I heard the presentation and everything else, I'm hearing non-lethal options, and then I heard a little bit why those aren't applicable. And I did speak with DBR staff at this time when there was some public outcry, and I did hear directly from DBR staff that they were upset. They thought that some of these were cruel. They wanted some change also. I'm glad to hear that they're looking at this program, but we need to figure out for our town, what is going to be allowed and not allowed. And if there are non-lethal options, we need to look at that. I do just want to say I'm sorry I got a little bit distressed just now because I did hear from DBR staff that they absolutely were aware a lactating mother had been shot, absolutely aware that there were multiple pups that were left, and not totally clear on what APHIS's non-lethal methods were, but it was clear that they have multiple lethal. I don't know if it was poisoning or trapping or shooting, but it was just a really horrifying situation. So thank you guys for being able to look at this, and I'm obviously available for any questions, from you or, in the future as well.
Thank you.
Do you want to clarify that, Brianna? The statement here, that was quite a strong statement.
So, one with the exclosure option, I think I forgot to respond to that last. Again, those are something that we have a permit to do. We have staff, including myself, who have erected them on a number of beaches in the state, and there's just very specific circumstances when they're a good idea to be used and when they could potentially be harmful to the adults. There's also the issue that chicks move, so as soon as the nest hatches, those chicks are not going to stay in an exclosure. And predators, that prey on eggs, many of them also prey on chicks. And then in terms of the most recent comment, from our understanding from APHIS, when they tell us that an adult has been removed, male or female, lactating, non-lactating, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's young, apparently. From my understanding, it can be prior. So once those juveniles were observed, we notified APHIS. I can say that, which I know is still rough to hear and doesn't change the fact of what happened. But all we can do is there was no intentional leaving of juvenile coyotes out there. And we're doing everything we can to try to prevent that from happening again, because no one wants to go through that or see wildlife go through that.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Joyce McClellan, and I first want to thank the board for putting this on the agenda and allowing us to speak. And I tried to see all views. The DBR, I realize and I respect, works very hard to protect the beach, which is all important to us, the birds, and to try to please the public as well. I can't imagine it's an easy job at all, and I do respect, all of the things that they try to do. With that said, after reading the article in the Duxbury Clipper, it really made me think a lot about this whole situation, and I thought two very strong things. One is that it's wrong of what happened, shooting animals, especially lactating animals, and leaving the young to suffer, and it's cruel. So it's wrong because personally, I feel people should not mess with nature, the ecosystem, the animal, natural, food pattern. It's all been that way forever, and it should stay that way. Nature is much, much bigger than what we are, and I don't think that we should fool around with it, because somehow I feel that it would fix itself, and probably not in a better way. Again, that's just my personal, take on the whole thing. So, and the other part about it's wrong is because it's cruel. I mean, it's like, to shoot these animals that are just being who they are and what they are, and we decide, what animal should live, what animal should die. I don't think that we should be able to do that. So that's what I was thinking when I was reading the article, and I don't normally, speak out about things, but it just kind of hit me, pretty hard, thinking about all of these things, and I just wanted to feel, that at least I said something about it. I did read just a couple of quick things today that I would like to read to you, if I can, if that would be all right.
That's fine.
Wildlife have countless benefits for the ecosystem and for our health and well-being, including pollinating our food, controlling pests, and being a source of beauty and inspiration. I mean, tell me that's not true. Every time you look and you see a wild animal somewhere, it just makes you feel really, really good seeing that. And the other thing was, critics often argue that hunting is immoral because it requires intentionally inflicting harm on innocent creatures. Even people who are not comfortable extending legal rights to animals should acknowledge that many animals are sentient. That is, they have the capacity to suffer. And I think this little guy that Eddie was talking about definitely suffered, and that's just one. So I just hope that we can find an answer to all of this and make, all of us beachgoers happy and keep the animals happy and kind of keep nature running on its course the best we can, and finding a solution, to all of this to make us all feel better.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Nancy Day, Depot Street. I think we can all probably agree that if there's a lactating mother, that there's probably a pretty good likelihood that there's pups. So, I'm listening to, this scratching of heads, like, we didn't know there were pups. Like, a lactating mother, anybody who understands animals should know that that means try to find the pups, okay? So that's a comment I wanted to make. But I actually have a request. We pay $1 million for this lease. The lease goes to the DBR, and the DBR uses that money to fund these sorts of activities. And as taxpayers in this town, and I think I probably have people who would agree with me, there needs to be more transparency. This should not be happening with a lot of confusion I'm hearing, fisheries and wildlife, and nobody knows who's in charge of what. There's regulations, there aren't regulations. There needs to be more accountability. There needs to be a policy. We need to understand why this is required, who's ordering what. It has to be nailed down, because what kind of community are we if we're just going to look the other way and let this happen without really understanding who, what, where, why, all those details. So my request is, we're in the midst of finalizing the language of the lease, the beach lease. We're in the midst of finalizing the HCP. We need to get this kind of information in there. There needs to be transparency. We need to know what's going on that beach, because we're funding it with our taxpayer money. And we need to have it documented, not just hearsay and nobody knows, but people who are in charge of running these programs need to have accountability. They need to be in charge of, there needs to be some kind of documentation that, we've all seen and understand, and making it more transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick response to that. I could speak for, I think, many of us. I hope we are trying to be as transparent as, that's part of the reason we have this, and then we've had our meetings about the beach. DBR has been gracious enough to present at a number of those meetings and forums. As far as the lease, the current lease is available on the Board of Selectmen's website. The HCP is also, I'm sure you've seen it on the website. But like you, I am always seeking to understand this, and that's the reason we have these, and I appreciate your comments, because unwinding the why is a constant effort here, it seems.
You understand, it has to be written down. We need to have a policy that we can all turn so that there's no confusion.
Okay.
and finger point.
Yeah, you need, sorry, make sure people who are watching hear exactly what you're saying. It's very important.
And I hear you, and I understand, we are all here trying for the same thing, and I know everybody works really hard, and you guys, I appreciate everything you do. I really feel like we can get this language into the lease. We can get, parameters around these sorts of activities. We've got to nail it down. It can't just be this wild, wild west out there, anything goes, and that's what it sounds like right now. And I feel like we've got a lot of, there's a lot of confusion around what happened, who knew what, when. Some of the stories don't add up. I think that there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be transparency. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Amy?
If I could just make a comment, because I do think that I don't want to place blame on DBR here, because what I am clearly hearing, and I think we've all confirmed this to be true, is that the state is requiring this program to be done. It is not DBR that is doing it, and it is necessary if we are to continue to utilize the beach with vehicles. That is my understanding, so that it appears to be out of our local control, because I totally agree. I mean, this is disturbing. I think it disturbs all of us. This should not occur, and I think the biggest thing that could come from this is I'm hoping that the state is hearing this conversation and understanding that our community is very upset by this and would like this practice to stop.
Exactly, but I feel like, there's some confusion even from that Clipper article about how often this takes place in the state. So I believe that number was 6 coyotes killed a year in the whole state, and look at how many were killed on Duxbury Beach. Are our numbers being reported? There just needs to be some accountability here. I get it, it's private property, but there's a private-public partnership here where there's, taxpayer money that's used for these activities. I feel like there needs to be, we need to get Carolyn or somebody at Fisheries and Wildlife to provide us with the exact language and whatever regulations there are. We need to see this as a community. You guys, as the select board, needs to see what language, what documentation there is that's causing this to need to be a practice. I know that there's trustees of reservations. With Cranes Beach, for example, they use non-lethal measures to, control their predators. And they do it with electric fencing around nests. That seems to be a much smarter way. So you keep the predators from getting to the nests rather than killing them. Why can't we come up with practices like that are just more humane? I wrote a letter to the editor last June for the Clipper. I wrote about how I feel very strongly in my core that playing God on Duxbury Beach, we're saying we're going to kill these animals so that these other animals can live. Like, that should not be something that we're involved in. I mean, I guess I'm maybe an optimist, and maybe that's just not how it goes with fisheries and wildlife. There might be regulations around why these things have to happen, but let's see them. I want to see them. I don't want to hear confusion and vague references to these requirements. Show us. I want to see it, and I think we all should see it. If we're allowing $1 million to go to the DBR and some of that money is paying for this kind of activity, then we need to know exactly what they're doing and why.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just comment on that, this is Carolyn Mostello from the state. The HCP has been available online since 2016, and it's accessible for you to look at the requirements of that HCP that spell out the mitigation requirements. Those are available. It is what happened in 2023 with the pup was very unfortunate. Nobody wants something like that to happen. It's very upsetting for everybody. As Brenna mentioned, we've taken steps to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again. But Duxbury does have a choice as to whether or not to participate in this HCP program. It just has to recognize that access will be further restricted under the current HCP. We are, as I said, working to revise the HCP and hope to have more mitigation options in the future. But the reality is right now, there is not another option. So I just want to make that clear. But, I am certainly sympathetic to how people feel about this situation. It was an ugly situation. It was very upsetting for me as well. And we don't want it to happen again.
Nancy.
Just one more follow-up. I'm just wondering, though, we can say we don't want to see it happen again, but I just want to know specifically, what are we doing to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And thank you. I mean, you can say it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna do a line here because if you'd like to speak, we're gonna ask people to get in line. Thank you.
I'll try to be quick, Mr.
No, there's a
Chairman.
woman behind you.
Oh,
Sorry. I'm sorry, Dwight.
This is not a new problem that we have. Dating back to 2012, we had sharpshooters on the beach that killed a lactating fox, left the kits there, and all of these letters came to the Clipper.
Ma'am,
People were outraged.
you need to
I'm
come
sorry.
close.
I don't know if
They
anyone-
won't pick you up on the.
Pardon me?
It won't pick you up unless the microphone's near you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's fine. And if you could just state your name and your street.
I'm sorry. Ashley Sten, Summer Street.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, these are the letters that showed up in the Clipper in 2012. The program apparently started in 2011. So it has been in place for many years, and here we are 12 years later, or 13, still back at the same place. This is the article from this year's Clipper, but still more letters in 2012. And I wanted to just take a moment to read an excerpt of Amy McKinnon, her editorial from 2012. She was the editor of the Clipper at that point. It's just I think she says it well, better than I could. The Endangered Species Act was passed by Congress in 1973 in an effort to provide for the conservation of ecosystems upon which threatened and endangered species of fish, wildlife, and plants depend. Its primary intention was to preserve and protect species that were endangered by human encroachment, pollution, and hunting. We were not kind to our fellow inhabitants of planet Earth. In passing this law, the intentions of many were good. Yet, I can't help but wonder at the basis of those intentions and the execution of the law. The basic assumption is that we humans are somehow stewards of the world, that we have the right to dictate to nature which species will live and which will die, all with the best of objectives. But we all know that old chestnut about good intentions and the pathway to hell. When I learned, this is Amy McKinnon, when I learned that 2 coyotes, a mother fox with an unknown number of kits waiting for her and her milk for their survival, and too many crows were killed because they did what nature intended, I couldn't help but think human arrogance exceeded those good intentions. It's right and good to sensibly make an effort to save those species whose survival has been threatened by human activity. But to take it a step further, to appoint ourselves superior to Mother Nature is absurd. And I think she said it really well back in 2012. Just a comment about Eddie had brought up the owls, and we all know what the food chain is. So if a crow is poisoned, other animals may eat it. And we don't know what the effects are going to be. I've read some where it's not going to affect the animals. We all know, Rachel Carson, we all know that, we can say it's not going to hurt our environment and other animals, but this is wrong. So I hope our town can look at this and come up with something that is ethically and morally what we should be doing as a town. How can we teach our children in our school system right from wrong if we're doing something like this as a town? Thank you.
Thank you. Dwight?
Mr. Chairman, over history, we human beings have thought we're so much smarter than every other type of animal that's out there. We see a problem in nature, and we're going to fix it. Well, what do we do when we fix it? We screw something else up, and that's what's happening to these poor animals. I think we should adopt, until we can figure this out, remember the DARE program, Just Say No? Stop killing these animals. Stop it. Let's figure it out some other way. I've had property on Cape Cod since I was a teenager. I've never heard of anybody on the Cape Cod killing a coyote or a fox, at least no organized program like this. We need this to end, please.
Thank you. And, sir, if you just mind stating your name and street for the record.
Dwight Shepherd, Carriage Lane.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, you've been waiting patiently on the Zoom.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Chris Kennedy. I am currently I'm a retired beach manager. I spent 32 years on Martha's Vineyard as in charge of all of our beach operations for the trustees of reservations on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. In all, it probably involved about 30 miles of various beach properties and trails. We had piping plovers nesting there, least terns. We have a number of mammalian predators. We have avian predators like gulls and crows. Also, being a senior member of the trustees of reservations, well aware of our predator programs at our other beaches, such as Crane Beach. So I have a fairly, broad experience, as well as I'm the former assistant commissioner of Massachusetts Fish and Game, as well as a deputy director for Massachusetts Environmental Police. So I really have walked the walk for many, many years. In fact, 45 years. I'm now retired, but I'm doing some consulting work, for instance, for Save Duxbury Beach. So a couple of things I'd like to point out. I think I really do appreciate, Carolyn Costello's comments. I think, she accurately reflects many of the points of view of the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, even though I may disagree. I think she's doing a very good job of defending and explaining the policies of fisheries and wildlife. And likewise, I think Brenna from the Duxbury Beach Reservation has done a very good job of explaining, where DVR currently finds itself. A couple of things I'd like to point out to you is that under the Habitat Conservation permitting program, you do not need to kill, predators on your property. You can elect, as the town of Orleans has done, to pay into a fund that allows for off-site mitigation. So that, one of the things I'm always concerned about is when you're dealing with a property that has extensive visitation, and especially if it's in a clearly a suburban area, you've got to be so very, very careful about allowing sharpshooters, especially. And again, the folks from U.S. Department of Agriculture are very good, but nevertheless, this is the kind of situation you can end up with. And so, I think that is certainly something that needs to be thought of moving forward here, is that, if you may be wiser as far as DVR is concerned to, again, consider non-lethal mitigation, which again is not honored by Mass Fish and Wildlife, and especially U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of the Habitat Conservation Plan. But it certainly, with the use of exposures, which are allowed, which protect the nest, and the use of electrified fencing, goes a long, long way to help protect these nesting birds, especially leaf terns as well as piping plovers. So there are options here, and I think it's kind of foolish to kind of think that, oh, we have no other option other than killing mammalian predators. There are other options. There is live trapping. There is paste aversion, which you can put bait into an exposure area that has this really foul tasting chemical on it. It's not lethal, but it certainly trains that predator that, the egg that's in there really isn't all that good tasting, so let's avoid it. And I think that again, the issues of we can't use non-lethal measures at Duxbury Beach, I think are not true. Duxbury Beach is a beautiful beach, but it is wide enough to allow for electrified fencing. It is wide enough to allow for predator exposures. And from 32 years of experience on the Cape and Islands, I can tell you it works. In cases where you don't want to use an exposure, is if you have especially an avian predator that has learned that there's food inside that exposure in the form of the adults. That's really about the only time that we didn't use exposure. So, I would certainly encourage DVR to, really realistically look at some of these other measures. And much like the town of Orleans, it may be a case where DVR and the town of Duxbury really wants to explore off-site mitigation measures. So it's not necessarily killing, a coyote, especially a lactating coyote on Duxbury Beach. Maybe it's killing crows and skunks and raccoons somewhere else. And so, I think those are some of the options. I really think that, it's time to begin to look at some of these other options that are available to the beach managers.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody else wish to speak?
Can I ask a question? And so,
Sure,
it
go ahead.
sounds like from Mr. Kennedy we can use off-site predation here. Why is that not an option for us? Maybe Brianna could answer that question.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so folks have to realize, as I outlined when I spoke earlier, that off-site mitigation is paying into selective predator management at another site. So it's a false choice. It's not lethal versus non-lethal. It's an in my backyard versus a not in my backyard situation. In regards to other comments that were made, all good beach managers that I know of are already implementing a variety of non-lethal predator management options that are appropriate for their sites on their beaches. In addition to, if they're participating in on-site mitigation, conducting that selective predator management. So it's not as if DVR is not using non-lethal measures. Brenna spelled out some of the non-lethal measures that they are using. So I do want to assure people that that is ongoing and occurring alongside the lethal measures. But DVR's HCP is so large in terms of the number of takes that it's requested that it cannot pay into mitigation solely because our mitigation program, our offsite mitigation program is so small that we really just could not we could not balance the takes with our current program. So DBR does have to do on-site and off-site mitigation to meet its mitigation requirements. I
So,
wanna be clear about that.
Carolyn,
Yeah.
are you saying that all of the other beaches are paying off-site mitigation so that the on-site mitigation is done at Duxbury Beach?
No.
No, I don't
So,
think she's saying
so
maybe.
some sites are conducting on-site mitigation and some sites are conducting off-site mitigation, but the off-site mitigation sites are those that have very limited take programs. All of the programs that have higher levels of take are conducting on-site mitigation. Duxbury Beach will be the only site that's doing both on and off-site because its program is so large that it can't just do one or the other, if that makes sense.
And that's something that you ultimately judge or determine?
It's math. It's simple math. They can't meet their mitigation requirements. They can't get the numbers they need doing just one or the other. They don't really have a choice. They have to do both.
And that's math that you've decided, you've set as the bar?
So the mitigation requirements of the HCP for the DBR's main activity, which is use of roads and parking lots in the vicinity of unfledged chicks, it's a 3-to-1 mitigation ratio, which means that for every pair that DBR impacts, they have to provide mitigation for 3 pairs. So with a take exposure limit of 24 pairs on Duxbury Beach, which is about half the plovers on Duxbury Beach, they have to provide mitigation for nearly 75 pairs. They don't have 75 pairs on site, so they have to go off site to provide sufficient mitigation to meet their mitigation requirements.
Okay. Well, thank you. Brenna, did you want to add to that?
Sure, if I can. Just say my name again.
No, you're fine.
So I kept a little list to try to, because there were a bunch of different comments and questions, so hopefully I hit upon them. But as I said in the presentation, if there's anything that anyone brought up that you're still wondering about from DBR's perspective, obviously we're not the state or APHIS, but always feel free to reach out. One thing which I said in my presentation, but should have reiterated in terms of knowing if there were juveniles on site or not, I think an important point is a coyote's home range is like 10 plus square miles, something like that. And a lot of the coyotes that are on Duxbury Beach, so we've been told are transient. So we don't, when something is removed, necessarily know if it was from the beach or not. Okay. So just wanted to remind folks of that. Two, someone said that Duxbury Beach's removal numbers are not being reported. That's not true. USDA APHIS has to provide us with a report, and as part of our reporting every fall to Mass Wildlife, as part of the HCP permit, we have to provide that report. So our numbers are definitely being included. And with that, our COI, just in terms of the transparency questions, are online. There's also a public comment period for that. Someone asked, what are we specifically doing to prevent the situation arising again? We had a training session with USDA APHIS for some of our field staff to make sure that they are better equipped to track and look for signs and locate any juveniles or anything on site in case, hopefully, knock on every piece of wood in here, it doesn't happen, but if it does, again, we want to shorten that time frame if there's something on site. We also took measures over the winter to try to decrease the denning sites. One of our staff spent a lot of time with clippers trying to create more pathways into dense areas, which would be more suitable for denning, to try to discourage and just get into that area. And we tried to start visits sooner. We were also working with beach ops to try to reiterate the protocols around communication, and we're doing that with our own staff who are coming on throughout the spring as well. Those are just some of the things we're doing, but again, happy to talk more about that. Happy to get more info about that corvid-specific poison. Not the expert on it, only know we've been told it will not impact other species. Someone mentioned that other beaches do not do predator management on the Cape, or folks like the trustees. Duxbury Beach is not the only ones doing the selective predator management. There are several other organizations in the state that do lethal predator removal. Let's see, Carolyn answered the question about mitigation options. As she said, we do not have an option. Electric fencing, Chris mentioned, I too have worked on a number of beaches and have done electric fencing. Hate to say it, does not always work. It's really difficult in a marine environment, especially one like Duxbury Beach, where it's kind of a very high impact beach and very narrow. It works well, at least in my experience, on several different beaches with least-run colonies or nesting areas that are kind of more contained polygons. Duxbury Beach strung out like beads on a necklace, basically, both behind and in front of the sand fencing. So that makes things like electric fencing really not feasible. Also, due to the narrowness of the beach, we have a concern about public safety. I'll be honest, we don't want people go into the fencing regardless of the signage. We certainly do not want anyone getting hurt on that. Similar with taste aversion. We, as I said, discuss with USDA, APHIS, and internally each year different non-lethal options, what we're going to test out, what we're going to continue doing. Taste aversion was one that was discussed as recently as this year. APHIS has said that they would not recommend doing it on Duxbury Beach and would not really want to participate in that because of the number of dogs that use the beach. And we know dogs are supposed to be on leash, but we know that doesn't always happen either. And these are, canine. They're meant to attract canines, and they could make people's dogs sick. So again, we don't want to do that. The beach is really narrow. It's really accessible. And if dogs are off leash and go up into these areas, that could be a concern. So APHIS strongly discouraged that. I think that hit on questions. So if there's any others, happy to answer.
Thank you.
I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Any other board members have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kennedy made reference to off-site mitigation as a solution, and I guess I want to hear more about that. If we're having mitigation off-site, I presume that means we're leaving coyotes on the beach, and wouldn't that impact the birds? And the issue there is, how would that affect our access or our permit? In other words, if there are coyotes still there, does that impact the birds? I presume it would. But more importantly, how does that impact access to the beach for recreational purposes?
Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
Isn't this more Carolyn?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I think one of the things to keep in mind here is that, for instance, being an old fogey that's retired, I've been doing some work with the Cape Cod National Seashore for the last 4 years. We have a lot of coyotes. We have a lot of piping plovers. We have least terns. And you find a balance. It's, again, if you're going to leave coyotes potentially with a 10-mile range, then you look at other options such as exclosures. Now, do the exclosures, which is basically a cage around the nesting piping plovers that protect those chicks once they hatch, because they're going to get out of that exclosure and start feeding on the beach? Well, the answer is no. But you know what? You've protected them for 4+ weeks while the adults are incubating those eggs. So everything in life is a compromise. And so is one particular method the end all be all? No. but you know what? You experiment and you try different things. And I think, again, I have to hand it to DVR. A year ago, when I first became involved with Duxbury Beach, I was appalled that OSBs were not included as part of the habitat conservation plan. Well, this year, through the efforts of folks like Andrew Marshall and the folks that Save Duxbury Beach, now overseeing vehicle use is now part of the certificate of inclusion, which is the permit. So I really think I give all the credit in the world to DVR staff for looking at other options, such as the use of oversand vehicles. What I'm now saying is that as a longtime beach manager who's managed piping clubbers, lease turns, as well as OSBs, and close to 2 million visitors a year on foot and in vehicles, try different things. And exclosures do work. They protect that nest and they protect the chicks. Let me give you an example. In 1982, we had 125 nesting pairs of plovers in Massachusetts. This past year, we had virtually 1,200 nesting pairs. So to go from 125 to 1,200, we're doing something right. And part of that was through the original set of rules and regulations that Fisheries and Wildlife set up for us as beach managers. So you know what? Plovers are doing very well. And as I said earlier, everything in life is a compromise. And so you do your best to try and keep the predators away from the nesting piping plovers, away from leaf terns. But at some point, yeah, it's going to happen that some of them are going to be taken and eaten. But it's again, that's nature. And
So
I'm a
let
firm
me
believer
let me interrupt just for a second. So all right, you didn't quite address my question. Maybe it's a question for DBR. So if we use this alternative, if it's even possible, and birds are taken, if that's the right word, as a result, does that adversely affect our permit? I.e., does that prevent folks from getting on the beach? Or I'm trying to understand, how taking the predators off the beach versus leaving them on the beach results in a net positive or negative to people getting out on the beach. That's where I'm getting.
Yeah, good question.
It's a very good question, because I thought what I'm hearing is that we are required to do both, that we don't have the option of doing just one.
Brenda's gonna help us.
But Let's hope that's.
And that's correct. And I mean, Carolyn, please weigh in if I misinterpret what you've said. But yes, because of how many exclosures on the brain, we need to do both. We have to do both on-site predator management and pay into this off-site mitigation fund, which will fund mitigation activities, including predator management elsewhere. So we have to do both. In terms of your question about whether or not predator management on-site benefits beach access, I mean, we haven't done a study on that. It would be cool if Carolyn maybe knows of anyone who has. I mean, one thought that Duxbury Beach Reservation has always had, and I know I've heard Rainey say similar things, is, one and done. We want the birds to come, in March, lay their nests in April and May, hatch, be successful, fledge, reopen, right? Ideally, taking away one of the large causes of nest and chick loss on the beach, which is predators, should aid in that, right? If they survive to hatch and then the chicks are, predated 5 days later, that pair might just start all over again. And that kind of resets the clock for opening. So, but in terms of has it, I think that's probably a complicated data analysis question that I don't have the answer to, but that is the part of the idea.
Okay.
Kind of follow-up question, right? So just make sure I understand. The reason why Duxbury Beach has such a large take exposure is because we allow OSV, we allow oversand vehicles on the beach. Is that right?
Partially.
Okay.
It's also because we have a parking lot in the middle of habitat.
Right.
And the birds, cross back and forth. And we have a road running the length
Right.
of the beach in order to access OSV access points, and those birds are crossing. If it was just OSV escorting, we probably wouldn't need more than a handful of take exposures. I don't know that we would get permission for more than a handful of take exposures to escort past chicks. Our biggest issue, as Carolyn mentioned, is that use of roads and parking lots.
Okay.
In order to get folks to the parking lots, park in the parking lots, drive down the back road to pullouts or to OSV crossovers, we spend a lot of take exposures.
Right. So the issue is people want to get access to the beach. They want to be able to drive there and park the car and walk on the beach. They want to at some point drive their vehicles onto the beach. And then we have people that live at the end of Saquish that need to drive along that road, right?
Well, they don't impact
they
our...
don't count.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not covered under
But the
our
bottom
COI.
line is because we have the geography of our beach and people wanting to access the beach and make use of the beach, then basically, if I get this right, Mass and Fish and Wildlife say, okay, you're going to impact a lot the plovers. All right, you're going to impact them a lot because you're amongst them, right? And therefore, to mitigate that impact, you've got to do certain things, right? And one of them is predator management. Is that right? Do I have this right?
Yeah, what we have to do
We
is
have to do
predator
it,
management, not
and
one of
because
the
we have
things
so
that
many
school we
takes,
have to
we
do.
just can't do off-site predator management. We've also got to do it on-site as well.
Yes.
So the problem is, people want to have access to the beach, and therefore, it's impacting the plovers, and so we've got to figure it out then. So the easiest solution is basically not to go to the beach then, right? And then we wouldn't be faced with this problem, right?
Well, I see our solution as,
Yeah?
I mean, this is just me speaking, is to continue to work with the state and the working group to see if there are future options,
Right.
both to improve the HCP to
Okay.
get more beach access, but also to give other options for mitigation.
Right.
We continue to work with APHIS and Mass Wildlife and our staff and beach operations staff to prevent, inhumane
Right.
portions of a predator management program that we're required to have currently. Yeah, those are kind of the
Right,
two
okay.
pieces that I see we can do right now.
So the HHP has evolved and has got slightly better, got more access?
that's why they have this working
I mean, Carolyn could probably speak more about that, but they're undergoing kind of an exploration of a
Right.
revision.
The
They have a
bottom line
stakeholder
is that Karen, the Mass Fish and Wildlife has heard the frustration people have and are trying to figure out a way to adjust the HCP to allow more access to the beach.
Yeah, and also I think to make, well, I'll let Carolyn
Yeah.
speak. She can.
Yeah, that's very true. So Fernando, one of the issues with the HCP was that when it was developed, nobody was exactly sure of how it would impact the birds. And the birds, the population was at a very different place than it is now. So the population of plovers has increased about 50% in Massachusetts since 2016. So we're having a lot of issues with our current HCP, which is very inflexible. So that's why we're hot to trot on revising it,
Okay.
so that we can make it more flexible for our HCP participants. We can iron out some of the bugs and inflexibilities that we're dealing with now, and one of those is the lack of flexibility in mitigation.
Okay.
We really want to try to address that. I do hear everyone's frustration. I have my own frustrations with the HCP as well. We really want people to be able to go to the beach. We think there's a strong conservation ethic in Duxbury and in our coastal communities in general. But we have to have a program that meets the federal requirements for the HCP. And so that's what we're working on now. We're working on a revision that meets the federal requirements, and that will be more workable for everybody involved and more flexible.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, I think this has been thoroughly discussed. Do we have one more?
Be short.
Okay, thank you.
Alicia Babcock, 9 Ocean Road South. This is just a little bit of free thought and a little question for Carolyn. In this revision that you're doing, I'm not 100% clear on the nuances of that, but it just seems to me like we're twisting ourselves in a pretzel because we're trying to use the beach. I mean, this has been in existence, the way we've operated. You know, we've cohabitated with nature on Duxbury Beach forever. I could understand if this was like a desolate strip of land that we were all of a sudden starting to inhabit, and we were building roads and we were building houses all from scratch, and we had to follow, you know, a set of guidelines because we were, you know, intruding on something, this, you know, setting that was maybe untouched. But this has been like this forever, and we're twisting ourselves in a knot to accommodate something that, nature takes care of itself. I mean, we can't possibly try to understand the intuition of animals. They just know what to do. They know where to go. You know, they know where not to go. I mean, maybe Duxbury Beach just is not the place for plovers. Maybe if we just left things alone and let nature take its course, they would just naturally gravitate to a more suitable environment. Not every single beach is constructed the same way. There's some that are perfect for plovers, and I think this program would be lovely. I think they would thrive, and I think that all of these efforts would be much more successful. But this is like jamming a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work on Duxbury Beach. And I think that we're also getting punished for, I mean, Massachusetts seems to be doing really well, and we're getting punished for other states in the Northeast that aren't. And I think this should be looked at, you know, not only beach by beach, case by case, but also maybe state by state, county by county. I mean, I think that we should start looking at a revision where we can pull out of this because it just doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
So Massachusetts.
Go ahead. Yeah, if you'd like to respond to that, you may.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that Massachusetts is, you know, the only state that has this piping plover HCP. It is Massachusetts specific because we have done so well with plovers. Plovers are really thriving on these beaches that are heavily influenced by people. And it's a bit of a surprise to us, but they are doing really well as long as they have some buffers from people and from vehicles. So it's good habitat for them. And we'll do what we can to give people more flexibility than they have right now. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate the conversation here. And
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next on the agenda, I'm going to let folks step out. If you wouldn't mind taking any conversations outside, just because we have a couple other things on the agenda that people have been waiting for. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the next item, we're going to have to reschedule it to May 6th. Chris Ryan wasn't able to stay on.
He wasn't able to stay on.
No.
No.
Okay.
Oh, Mr. Dennison.
I hope this
Been
wasn't a
waiting.
billable
Well,
moment.
that's not good.
All right. So
Here that way, and we had to postpone.
I'm gonna just state this. So the next item on the agenda was a discussion and update with Chris Ryan, our former planning director, regarding the following actions to be taken by the board: establishing a Halls Corner working group, establishing an MBTA communities working group, and Mr. Reed would like to say something about that.
Yeah, Chris Ryan wasn't able to stay on because he had another engagement at 8:30. Paul Halkiotis, our interim planning director, was here too, but I cut him loose knowing that Chris wasn't going to be here. So we're going to have to reschedule it for May 6th. Sorry about that, Wayne.
You can, yeah, I will. You've been sitting here patiently for almost 2 hours.
Wayne Dennison, 320 Standish Street, also a member of the planning board. The only input that I wanted to provide relative to that is you folks are looking for a planning board designee for a couple of those groups. The planning board has met and has made suggestions in that regard. You will probably just hear those suggestions from Mr. Ryan, but I'm going to just tell you what the suggestions are. I would like to serve on the House Corner group, and Scott Casagrande wanted to serve on the other group, and that's the suggestion the planning board has made.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Wayne.
Thank you.
Mr. Dennison, could I do know that you have a lot of knowledge about the MBTA issue. Will you be working to share that knowledge with this group as that moves forward?
I'm happy to do that
Thank you,
in
sir.
every capacity that I have in this.
All right. You're on
Thank
the
you.
planning board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you very much for being patient. We have a discussion regarding a temporary, so what was the date on the MBTA's?
May 6th.
May 6th, okay. The next item on the agenda, discussion regarding temporary signage request by the Community Garden Club. Do we have anybody here from the Community Garden Club?
No.
Okay. Who's going to be presenting this? Or
I will.
explaining it?
Ms. Katie Hunt, a member of the Community Garden Club, excuse me, Fernando,
That's okay.
is hosting the Hydrangea Festival and Garden Tour. This year, they were hoping to advertise using 12 18 by 24 yard signs at various sites the Garden Club maintains throughout Duxbury, specifically the Duxbury Free Library, the St. George Street Flagpole Island, Boomer Square Island, the island at Toby Garden in Tremont, the island at Chestnut Street in Tremont, Miles Standish sign, island at Chestnut Street in Tremont, Hall's Corner Rotary Island, 2 islands at Millbrook intersection 139 and 3A, Route 14 Rotary, and the Town Green. And you have a proposed motion below.
Do we have a thing about signs?
Yeah.
We do.
You can approve these.
We can approve them.
Yes. It's
Temporary sign.
zoning bylaws, section 601.8.7, exempted signs, which states temporary signs erected for any charitable or religious cause or allowed by the Board of Selectmen, now Select Board. We've discussed this in the past.
Right.
Probably could have used another comma in that sentence, but I think we've allowed these in the past based
Right.
upon the language that's in that bylaw section. But
And there's a time frame for how long these signs are up for?
yes. How long?
It's
May 1st to the 12th.
Okay, May 1st, May 12th, all right.
Or no, and then July 14th and 22nd.
Oh,
It's 30 days,
30 days. Yep.
30 days.
Leading up to the garden tour. Would you like that?
and for this one, it looks like they're looking for them to not be contiguous.
Right. Yep.
So,
They'll put them up and take them down.
And then put them back up again. And take them down again.
and
Go ahead.
I just want to, Fernando is absolutely correct. There was a time not too long ago when
Yes.
we were getting many of these
Two.
requests.
Yeah.
And we felt like we really needed to, the bylaw is in place. Yes, we can make a decision to kind of override it for these temporary situations. First, I want to be the first to say that the Garden Club that does a terrific job maintaining our islands. They do it, just for our community. They don't get anything other than our thank yous, and they do a wonderful job. That is not why I would want, why I hesitate, on this, because I do think, again, they are certainly worthy of the signage. I think it is a concern. Again, the town has a no sign bylaw.
Right.
I will bring up again that I think that it is imperative for the town itself to follow our bylaws. We have 2 signs in town that I've noticed recently, or scrolling again, one at the Duxbury Senior Center and one at the police station, which are not in conformance with our zoning bylaws, nor did they get a special permit. And those are illuminated signs. They're quite a distraction, really, if you drive by them. They're all the reasons why we have a bylaw that limits signage to a special permit, and it is very restrictive what is allowed within our bylaw. So I think it's really important that the town itself follow our bylaws, and that we, require, if we're going to decide to grant this on, a case-by-case basis, I think we really, need to be careful.
The zoning bylaw allows this.
Right, it
specifically
allows the planning, it allows the
Please.
select board
Yeah.
to, on a temporary basis.
Yeah.
And again, we've had
We've
this
done for it.
conversation.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
And you're saying those other signs are outside of this
The
exempted?
the other the other signs didn't receive, they just appeared. They did not receive a special permit. They did not go through the process. I don't know how it occurred, but it did, and the town needs to follow our bylaws, just like we expect our residents to follow our bylaws.
I note that all these locations are locations that are maintained by the Garden Club,
Right.
which I think is
Appropriate.
definitely
Yes.
appropriate.
And again, they do a great job.
Yep.
Yeah, they do. That's really,
I'm ready to make a motion.
all right, I will entertain a motion. Thank you.
I move that the select board, permit the placing of lawn signs as requested by Ms. Hunt, stated in her email of March 29, 2024, on behalf of the Community Club of Duxbury, a nonprofit charitable organization in accordance with zoning bylaws, section 601.8.7, exempted signs, which states temporary signs erected for any charitable or religious cause or allowed by the select board contingent upon the following conditions. 1, placement of the signs 18 inches by 24 inches as described in the request dated March 29th, 2024. 2, displayed at the locations described earlier by the town manager. And 3, signs to be displayed during May 1 through 12, inclusive for ticket sales, and July 14th through July 22 inclusive, days leading up to the garden tour.
Any discussion, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, right.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I shall be the official seconder.
All right.
That's the seconder seat.
That is the seconder seat.
And I hope that folks
I'll second.
attend our Hydrangea Festival and Garden Tour on July 18th to the 23rd. They do have a website, www.communitygardenclubofduxbury.org. The next item on the agenda is the annual Arbor Day proclamation. And I will give that. My fellow board members are all right with that, please?
Of course.
All right.
You have the
Because you're
honor.
a tree hugger tonight.
I am.
Proclaim
I
away.
wear a lot of hats. Whereas the town of Duxbury has been named a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation, a nonprofit education organization dedicated to tree planting and environmental stewardship. And whereas the town of Duxbury has received this national recognition for over 20 years. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, we, the Duxbury Selectboard, by and through its chair and Duxbury Town Manager, do proclaim April 26, 2024 as Arbor Day in the town of Duxbury, to be observed with ceremonies at the Chandler School and the Alden School. We urge citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and to support the town's community forestry program. And doing that, and I think it's a wonderful program. I know that the schools often plant it, I think every year they plant a tree.
Yep.
It's a great way to pass down that to our young people.
I move that the select board approve the Arbor Day proclamation as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Our town manager has a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of updates for you. First, on the PFAS prioritization plan, Ryan Trahan and I from Environmental Partners have been working on the agreement for the PFAS prioritization plan, and I anticipate having that wrapped up this week. We've run it through council, got their comments back, so we're just finalizing the document itself. With regard to the classification and compensation study, I've been working with our Human Resources Director, Jeannie Horn, on that. We completed it the last time it was completed was December of 2021. The request for price quotes went out on April 11th, and the responses for the project are due to her office this Friday, the 26th.
I congratulate you on doing that.
Thank you.
Need to keep it, that's why we can hopefully afford to hire a planner as a result of that compensation study,
So
so.
on that subject,
Yes.
an interim planning director. As I mentioned earlier this evening, I have hired Mr. Paul Halkiotis to serve as our interim planning director. Paul actually started here today, and he'll be helping us out until just sometime before Labor Day. As some of you may remember Paul's name, he previously served as Duxbury's first planning director in the mid to late 1980s. We're happy to have him back on our team, even if for only briefly, to help us out with an interesting workload of planning projects. As a result, Chris Ryan will be helping out with this transition and winding down his work here in Duxbury. And my sincerest thanks go to Chris for his continued assistance and sticking with us to help get us through to this point. And that point will actually become May 6th now, as I mentioned earlier. With regard to the DPW building project, on Thursday of last week, the DPW building project went out to bid. The filed sub-bids for the project will be due on Thursday, May 16th, and the general contractor bids will be due on Thursday, May 30th. And an update for you on the Sustainable Budget Task Force. I have drafted the charge and populated the committee. Fernando's passing out the information to you now. The members of that committee are going to be Mary McKinnon, our finance director. She'll sort of be spearheading it for me. Dr. Danielle Klingeman, the school superintendent. Lisa Freely, the school department business director. Betsy Sullivan, the finance committee member. Alex Chin, the fiscal advisory committee member. Laurel Deacon, who is a school committee member, and Fernando Guitart from this board. And Mary will be convening that meeting forthwith, I think the first week in May, which is, next week sometime, right? Or the one after? So,
Thank you for including a couple of people from the school department and a school committee member.
yeah, you're welcome.
What, more than half the budget? So
Yeah.
it's going to be
Two-thirds.
pretty
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, so they will be off to the races. And that's my report.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Please.
Mr. Halkiotis, will he be a full-time or is he on a part-time basis during?
He's full-time, but he's going to work from home. I can't remember, Amy, if it's 1 or 2 days a week. I know it's at least 1.
Okay. And then regarding the DPW and the site work, we talked about the possibility of utilizing the sand from that site for nourishment at our own beach at the seawall.
Yeah, we did, and I have a response, but I forgot to bring it tonight. I just had too many other things. Let me see. I think the answer was that if interested, the DBR would have to partner.
No, our beach.
Oh, for
Our-
We're talking about for
seawall.
our own seawall.
Oh, you're talking
Save the
about-
taxpayers
Oh, for the
millions
seawall?
of dollars if we could use our own sand from the DPW and truck it to
At this
nourishment
point, I
at
don't
the
know that that's an option because they went out to bid, and they had, as they had explained that they were going to do. So I don't know if it's an option, but I'll find out.
Okay, when would that have gone out to bid? Because we've been
It went out,
talking
well, as I
about
said, it went out
this.
to bid.
Sand went out to bid too?
Yeah, the filed sub-bids did. It went out on Thursday of last week.
So,
And
okay,
it-
I'm going
and
to
it
try not
couldn't-
to get super frustrated here because
But it couldn't,
again,
the project could not be held up for the purpose of sand. It's a $26 million project, and the value of the sand is far lower than that. It wouldn't make sense to stop the bidding project, the process. And they were here to explain that.
yeah, we didn't get into that conversation when they were here about the utilization of the sand. We were just learning, that the sand, that I guess there's some challenge with some contamination there. But again, it's my understanding that there's quite a bit of sand that is suitable for nourishment. We know that it's been costing the taxpayers millions of dollars to fund these efforts, and it seems common sense and a good use of our resource, it being the sand, to utilize it in another area of town, saving the taxpayer dollars. So
Yeah, we had sent the information over to Leslie Fields, I do remember that, to see if the grain size was compatible. She was going to check that out too. So I have not heard back from her.
if it would be very disappointing, I think, if we were to miss this opportunity. So if we could, as a board, ask Rainey to please try to make
You don't
this
need
a
to.
part. Okay,
I just wrote it down.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
The PFAS prioritization plan, will that, will that go before the Water Advisory Board first? Or
It
will
already did. They provided the scope.
Yeah.
So they've
It's
provided,
Candace
so that's what I'm
Martin's-
trying to understand, the
This is
genesis.
sort of the last step.
Okay, and then it will
Signing
come
the
before
contract.
us.
No, I signed the contract.
Okay. So this last part with Trahan is, it's not going to come before us before it gets signed?
No.
Why is that?
Because I sign contracts.
It's a
I know,
contract.
but are they all right with the prioritization?
Yes,
Yeah,
it
so
wouldn't
it's-
be, it wouldn't be in front of me if it wasn't.
It's the Water
So can somebody
Advisory Board.
explain to me
Sorry,
that?
Yeah.
the Water Advisory Board, Candace Martin, still, that team has been working on that prioritization plan, all right? So.
With Ryan
the
Trahan.
PFAS group, yeah.
The PFAS group, Jim Bagley, all those guys, and Tanya Travison.
And
They
what do you-
worked it out with Ryan. And then
Yeah.
from that point, Candace sent it over to me, said, we're ready to go.
Yep.
Okay.
Brian tells me, we're ready to go. So at
Okay.
that point, then I fire it off to council. I say, council, we're ready to go.
Yep.
Then they send me back their proposed changes, then Ryan and I meet to, virtually to get it all squared away in one document. I sign it, Ryan signs it, they're off to the races.
And now it's coming back to me. This is just to come up with the plan.
Yeah, the $700,000 project. Yep.
Got it.
Article 14.
Right, but luckily, we also have in the coffers the money appropriated at town meeting to immediately get started on mitigation.
The million,
Because
yep.
the DEP did exactly what we had thought, which was to lower the allowed limit to 4 parts per trillion.
Correct.
So we have positioned ourselves, if we capitalize on the jump start that town meeting gave us by getting right into, getting whatever mitigation is at the top of the list going. Because if we hesitate, then we've lost that opportunity.
And I believe the working group and Ryan Trahan are both
Yep.
very in tune with that.
Yep. That's why we pushed it.
Yes, but let's not,
No, I can tell you, no,
I'm concerned about some foot
Water Advisory
dragging here,
Board
I'm not
are
going to
all over
lie.
it.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. That's all do you have any questions, or are you?
Nope.
All right, anybody else? Everybody's good? Town manager report?
Yep, thank
All
you.
right, committee appointments and reappointments and resignations.
I move that the Select Board appoint or reappoint the following people to the following boards for the following terms. Agricultural Commission, Jeffrey Chandler, Carl O'Neill, Earl Ricker, all reappointments ending, the term ending June 30th, 2027. Audit Committee, Vincent Walsh as the Fiscal Advisory Representative, appointed for a term ending June 30, 2025. Design Review Board, Justin Heel, Megan McClure Koss as an alternate, Matthew Blumenthal, reappointment, appointment, and appointment respectively, all with a term ending June 30th, 2027. 4th of July Committee, Jamie McNabb, Stu Ruggles, Barbara Cleary, Janet Rich, Janet Skaggs, Chris Barry, Hutton Collin, Nancy Reed, Jeff Goldman, Freeman Bo Boynton III, Pamela Campbell-Smith, Nancy Rufo, and Danielle Bryan. All reappointments with terms to expire April 30, 2025. Nuclear Advisory Committee, James Lampert, reappointment with a term ending June 30, 2027. Old Colony Elder Services, Joanne Moore, reappointment with a term ending June 30, 2025. Old Colony Planning Council, Aging, Joanne Moore, reappointment with a term ending June 30, 2027. Open Space Committee, Kathy Cross, Melissa Brown Rosenblatt, Rich Holmes, all reappointments with terms ending June 30, 2027. Recreation Activities Committee, Brian Campbell and Gary Williams, both reappointments with terms ending June 30, 2027. Resignation, Fiscal Advisory Committee, James Lampert, effective June 30, 2027. I think we can vote that.
2024.
Yeah,
Excuse me,
second.
2024, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, With
second.
respect to the appointments, the second.
Second, right?
Yep.
That's right. I thought I was the second guy.
I know, I was
You just
clarifying,
seconded.
it's just the appointments.
Just appointments.
Any discussion? All those
Thank you
in,
to all our volunteers.
Yes.
yeah, that's a great point. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
Well,
Yes.
because
Jamie's on the list.
Jamie's on
I'm not
On
sure
the
I should
4th of July
appoint him.
committee.
The following boards and committees have available seats. Economic Advisory Committee, 1 seat. Fiscal Advisory Committee, 2 seats. King Caesar Advisory Committee, 1 seat. Nuclear Advisory Committee, 1 seat. If anyone is interested in volunteering on a board or committee, you are encouraged to fill out a talent bank form, which can be found on the town's website under the Forms and Documents tab.
Thank you. All right, we have a one-day liquor license request. I know is this the one we got an updated one?
5 of them.
Go ahead.
5 1 days. I move that Mr. James Kuhn, as representative of the Bay Players of Duxbury, is granted a 1-day all alcoholic licenses for Bay Players live performances at the First Parish Unitarian Church located at 842 Tremont Street, Duxbury, on the following dates, all subject to the conditions of the licenses. Friday, May 10, 2024, 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Saturday, May 11th, 2024, 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Friday, May 17th, 2024, 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Saturday, May 18, 2024, 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. And Sunday, May 19, 2024, 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m.
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we have a couple of event permits, the first being a Ragnar Relay New England 2024 race.
That was taken off.
It was?
Yep.
Oh, missed
They
that again.
failed to submit a certificate of insurance in a timely fashion, meaning we don't have one.
Okay. Kids Celebration Parade.
If I can just add, by the way,
Yeah,
to
sure.
the Ragnar, the selectman/manager's office reached out on multiple occasions to the applicant to secure the certificate of insurance, and for reasons that have not been made clear to us, the certificate was not provided. Is that right, Michelle? Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for reporting that. Now we have a Kids Celebration Parade. And I will take a motion. It kind of explains what it
I will
is.
find the motion.
This Ragnar's quite huge.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Huge.
I'm surprised that they didn't.
They didn't do it.
Yeah. I move that Mr. Cole O'Shaughnessy, as representative of the Heather Bone Foundation, is granted permission to hold a Kids Celebration Parade fundraiser at the Alden School/Taylor Field on Sunday, June 30, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., contingent upon the conditions of the permit.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just want to congratulate the foundation on moving to bigger digs. It looks like they've moved out of the neighborhood because the event
Yeah.
got big enough.
And I see from the
Congratulations.
letter that they are a registered 501c3 corporation now, and raising money to grant to charities focused on children and families in need, with a focus on local recipients and sponsors. So that's very wonderful. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We don't have any minutes.
We don't have any minutes, and we also,
We have announcements.
we have some announcements here.
We do have a number of announcements. Okay. Commercial shellfish license applications. Commercial shellfish license applications are available in the Select Board's office in Old Town Hall. You can apply only during the month of April, and applicants must be a Duxbury resident and have a Massachusetts commercial fisherman's permit showing, quote, endorsed shellfish, unquote. For more information, please contact the Select Board's office at 781-934-1100, extension 5402. Reminder of annual mandatory outside watering restrictions. In order to maintain our water supply for domestic use and fire protection, the following outside water restrictions are effective annually from May 1st through September 30th. Odd-numbered houses will be restricted to Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Even-numbered houses will be restricted to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. All outdoor watering to be done between the hours of 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. No watering on Sunday. Mandatory rain sensors are required to be installed for automatic irrigation systems. The use of a handheld hose is allowed any day of the week when mandatory restrictions are in place. The hose must be equipped with an automatic shut-off style device, which would stop the water from flowing if the person were to walk away or drop the hose. Next, the Duxbury Litter Sweep will be held on Saturday, May 4, from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Tarkland Community Center on Route 53, Duxbury front lawn. The next scheduled Select Board meeting will be on Monday, May 6, 2024, at 7 p.m.
We are not meeting next week. All right. That is all. We have a bonus shellfish
Yeah.
season.
Okay. I move that the Select Board declare a temporary bonus shellfish season for, 1, the commercial harvesting of soft-shell clams for the month of May, and 2, the commercial harvesting of quahog clams for the month of May.
Second.
If I can just mention
Sure.
for discussion purposes,
Of course.
with our materials came a memo from the Shellfish Constable
Yeah.
making reference to specific locations of some of these, let me see, some of these locations.
Yeah,
Right.
feel free to read them.
And the reason I raised that is I reached out to the Shellfish Ward for clarification as to whether these are existing locations or new locations, and he clarified these are existing locations, and the reason he called them out is to prevent potential confusion between those who are harvesting under the permit and those who might be harvesting under a recreational permit, so it's easier to enforce, is the point, which is why he was very specific about the locations.
Okay,
So it's not new, is the point as well.
great.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.